always had somebody has to do it. And I guess it's just my DNA or how I'm wired that I understand that this happens in the world, and I'm the person that has the ability, both I learned a skill set, but also mentally that I'm here to help. And I'm not going to be able to help everyone. So I'm able to, I don't know the right word, but to say I did the best I could so I don't internalize it in this one thing I carry forever. I have a lot of memories where things didn't go well, but I always looked at it from the positive side. Someone's got to do it. And if nobody did it, then there'll be a lot more people in a lot worse shape or not make it. That was kind of my mindset.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Eternal Optimist podcast. And I'm your host, Matt Drinkon. And today we have a real treat. This is the first time in 203 episodes that I have had the privilege of interviewing the chief of police, who I just got to say, Chris, before we dive in, that I've always grown up, because my dad was in the military, I've always grown up in a place where I was kind of taught to believe in and respect and trust authority. And personally, in my experience with law enforcement, I have been pulled over for speeding a few times. Please don't hold that against me. But
we all have.
my experience with law enforcement has been very positive. So coming into this conversation, it's a real treat to get to interview you. Our chief of police here in Rock Hill, South Carolina, Chief Chris Watts. So, Chris, welcome to the show today.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a real honor. So for the everyday person, I know if I meet someone who has a title of doctor, I call them doctor this or doctor that. How do I address the chief of police? Do I call you Chris or Mr. Watts or Chief?
Chris, if you want to call me Chief, that's fine. Chris is just as fine.
Okay, great. Well, I'm comfortable with that, so I'll call you Chris. And Chris, I awesome. Love to ask you some questions today from a lens of, let's just start with a lens of wanting to learn more about law enforcement and some of the things that you encounter and endure that I'm not privy to, the stuff that I don't know. So that's part of what I like to go into today. But before we go there, I'd love to just ask you about your origin story, Chris, if we can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was born in Charleston, but I was raised in Rock Hill. So I've spent my whole life here. Growing up, I've been blessed. My parents are still alive, wonderful parents. I grew up in a neighborhood that we don't have anymore. I don't see it anywhere, where there's a number of kids a little bit older, a little bit younger, my age, and we just went out and played. And when the sun started going down, that's when everybody went back. So coming up, I had a great childhood. I have no complaints. And in high school, all I wanted to do was get out in the workforce. And I somewhat did that, and went to college later. I kind of did it. I wouldn't have done well at that point in my life, but it had been nice to do it back then. My parents might have helped me out a little bit. Growing up, I had 3 brothers that were younger than me. And again, we were in scouting growing up. We were playing sports, all of us. I don't know. I have 2 adult kids now, and I don't know how my parents did 4 boys. Now, there was a 10-year spread between me and my youngest brother, but we were never short of any activities, and our parents were always really engaged and taking us wherever we needed. So, again, growing up in Rock Hill was a great place. You had the coast 3.5 hours away and the mountains 2.5, and we spent a lot of time as kids, at both places. So, very fortunate and blessed to have a childhood like that.
It was you, and so 4 boys. You're the oldest. What did your parents do for work?
So my mom stayed home most of the time. When I started high school, she started working part-time. But she did a lot of, so Winthrop University is here in Rock Hill. And kind of on the side, she reviewed papers. So she got paid to, go over, make edits to help before they turned in papers. So, but mostly she was a stay-home mom to keep us wrangled up in the right direction. My dad started out when I was younger in the construction business, and then ended up in the engineering department at the Catawba Nuclear Station, and retired from there now about 17 years ago. But he spent most of his time there.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, can you give us a brief history of your career in law enforcement? So now you're the chief of police, but where did you start there, Chris?
So let me say that, number one, I never had a desire to be a police officer. I wasn't enamored with them, but I didn't not like them. I respected them, and they were police officers. My goal at that time when I was coming out of high school, I wanted to be a firefighter paramedic.
Okay.
Never became a firefighter, but I joined the Rock Hill Rescue Squad, and this is back in the 80s now. So I joined the Rock Hill Rescue Squad, and that was mostly, rescue, extrications of automobile wrecks, and that's mostly what we did. But then I finally got a job full-time at Piedmont Medical Center with their emergency medical services. And I spent most of the 80s working with them, with the ambulance service. So, But as I went in, so if our partner was off, there were always part-time EMTs that would work with us. And there were 4 that were with Rock Hill Police Department. And they were always trying to get me to join. And for some reason, the retirement system through the state was a lot better than, it was better than what I had.
Okay.
And I did see a lot of people at 45 or 50. There were a lot of long-term paramedics there. They'd been there before me and were retired. But some of them, if you couldn't lift a stretcher, back or knee problems, you really didn't have a job. So then at 45 or 50, I saw some of these guys going out. You're selling insurance, you're selling cars, or whatever you could find. I said, I don't want to spend a whole career in this and not have ability, if I was hurt, to be able to move to another area. Or if police officers are hurt, there's a medical retirement. So I made that change, and obviously it was the right change, and it really worked out for me in the long run. Never desired to say my goal is to be a chief. That wasn't it. It was just to move up. Actually, I just wanted to be a detective and retire at 25 years as a detective. So obviously I went way past that, which I've enjoyed. It was a great opportunity. I'm still in it. I could have retired a long time ago and got out of it, but I enjoy the people that I work around.
Okay.
I enjoy the community, and my personality and skill set, I guess, fits this. And I'm just a person that likes to serve. So kind of fits on that.
Well, I'm going to hit pause on questions on the chief of police at the moment and go back and ask one question about your time when you were in the rescue squad. And I'm curious if you kind of go back into that era. Can you share a story with us where you were really tested or challenged in some way that really pushed you to your comfort zone limits back then?
Well, there was a number of times on extrication, and we had a guy between 2 trains in a car that it was a space probably less than 4 feet apart. The car was in between it. And I remember me and my brother were both on the rescue squad, and we were able to extricate him alive. He made it. And when we came up, and it was like, there's no way this person's still alive. But, it was not his day, and fortunately we were able to get him out. But that was one of the uniques, to be caught up between 2 trains on the tracks, and then you have a car really crunched up. But he made it, and, it was a challenge to get him out without hurting him worse.
Yeah.
But it happened. And again, a long time ago, but that was one of the things as far as a positive. And when you approach it as like, well, we're just going to do a recovery, that person's not going to be alive. But fortunately, there's stories like that it turns out to be positive.
Have you always had a strong stomach or an ability to kind of stay focused when there's like pain or challenge or something like that right in front of you? Or did you have to develop that over time?
No, I've always kind of had that. I've always had somebody has to do it.
Okay.
And I guess it's just my DNA or how I'm wired that I understand that this happens in the world and I'm the person that has the ability, both I learned a skill set, but also mentally that I'm here to help. And I'm not going to be able to help everyone. So I'm able to, I don't know the right word, but to say I did the best I could so I don't internalize it in this one thing I carry forever. I have a lot of memories where things didn't go well, but I always looked at it from the positive side. Someone's got to do it. And if nobody did it, then there would be a lot more people in a lot worse shape or not make it. So that was kind of my mindset.
Well, thank you. And you're in the right place.
Yes, I will say that I did struggle with smells. That's one thing I never got over. I always struggled with that. And so never was able to get over that where I could manage it because some scenes, it sounds bad, but I'm, trying to not dry heave or, kind of try not to just gag on that.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
Some people have a talent, they could do it and manage it, and I struggle with that part of the job, especially in EMS.
Interesting. Well, so thank you for that precursor to where we are now. So now, the chief of police, I've always wanted to ask this because I see, at least when I turn on the media or any social media, I always see like the negative side painted in such a horrific light, the work that law enforcement does. And that's never been my experience, but that's what I see on social media. So what is it that the public that might not understand or know if they've never been in your seat? What is it you can share with us that might help us to see things a little bit more through your eyes if we can?
So a lot of times people, think that officers get in the job for the, I want to shoot somebody or I want to do this. And that is not the case. The overwhelming majority of police officers have never shot. I mean, probably in the 90% with all of the officers are in that area that never have pulled the trigger.
Okay.
There's a lot of times that you pull your gun being on the safety side, but actually pulling the trigger and having to use your gun is very minimal. Again, to the number of calls that we go on across the U.S. and the number of officers. So that's one thing that's not what we get out. We use the best way to be successful is talking to people and then using the pen, now computers, to document and write the story of what happened. Because again, ultimately it goes to court and is presented to a jury and we have to put that together. So really it's talking to people, trying to de-escalate. And that's a new term that we hear a lot, but officers have been doing that for at least my whole time there. I've witnessed it. Let's talk through this. Again, sometimes that doesn't work out. But the other thing is, I see it at Rock Hill, and I can say this to other places. I find out a lot of things after the fact. Just recently, we had an officer out of his pocket. There was a homeless lady. She was a veteran, and he paid for 3 days in a hotel room. Out of his pocket, didn't tell anybody. We had another officer to stop a lady who her insurance expired. Technically, they could have gone to jail in that particular case, but the officer decided to call the insurance company and paid her insurance. to get it renewed. And officers don't make a lot of money all the time. I mean, I hear, again, officers are going to taking money out of their pocket and paying for diapers or paying for a meal. And this happens here at Rock Hill, but it's not. It's law enforcement across the nation. We had in 2017, we had the BMX World Championships here in Rock Hill at the BMX Center. And I walked in the team field, and I was kind of surprised. This guy from New Zealand said, "Hey, are you the marshal?"
Okay.
I'm the chief. He said, "Okay." He said, "I want to say thank you, and I'm impressed. All of your officers are nice." And I'm kind of like, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, what we see from American policing, y'all just shoot and beat everybody."
Yeah.
Where'd you get that? Well, the only news we get is CNN. And, well, there are a lot of times negative, but what he said is just our image of of American policing was negative because of the news. But we get here, and every officer that we've come across throughout the whole event, which turns out to be about a week long, he says, everybody's been nice, very helpful. I don't see it as anything out of the way. But again, if you come from another country and your perspective is, or your belief is, this is what policing is there, I can see it. So that was really cool to hear from him, something positive that, for the most part, we know that's happening. There are people, the majority, I think, of the everyday person is extremely supportive of law enforcement. They may get mad at us from time to time because they got a ticket, but overall, they're very supportive. And again, that's the majority, and that's across the nation. You go to most communities, and they're going to support their local police because, again, the police are doing the right thing. Do we screw up? Oh, yeah. And sometimes it's in a really bad way. So, but I think overall, policing in general, to include Rock Hill, we really try to serve our communities. And the old adage, I think, that started in 1960 was protect and serve.
Yes.
Started in LA, I believe, or to use it. And that's absolutely true. We're there to protect people, but we're also and spend more time serving them in whatever way we can.
Yes. Well, you mentioned a homeless lady a minute ago, and I guess that's one question I have, or just a thought going around in my head about homeless. It sounds like an impossible or incredibly challenging issue if you're in law enforcement. And I'm wondering, through the lens of our law enforcement chief, I mean, how do you view the homeless and just the challenges that come with, policing or just seeing and serving? I mean, how do you view homeless, I guess, is the way to start.
So homeless, number one, is an extremely complex issue. A lot of people say this is the box it's in, and it's not really the way it works. So the people, and it is a challenge. It's not going away. And I would say right now it's still increasing, and or at least it is not decreasing. So a lot of the people that are homeless for whatever situational, we never as police see them because they're working really hard to get back out of it. There's a lot of the ones that police deal with are the ones that are addicted to some drug and or some mental illness involved. Okay. So when we deal with them, Rock Hill has Pathways. It's an organization that has a lot of other groups that help people get back on. And they have a system for this. So if we come across someone and they're really wanting help, we have a place, or at least for them to talk. I will say that the space is they have a lot of space, but they don't have enough space. But we do have places and resources for our officers to help someone that is wanting help. But again, the ones we have a challenge with is the ones that I'm okay right now, don't bother me. We don't have homeless running from us. We're in the camps. We're out in the field talking to them all the time, trying to give them help. Sometimes like, here you go. You're going to see if I want help today. And the relationship's there. So some people are not just ready to make that change. And then a lot of them out there that we deal with, again, just chronically out there, they have families in the area, but the families have finally got to the tough level. You know, I've been trying to work with you for the last 5 years, and nothing's helping. So I'm cutting you off. And because at least in York County, Rock Hill's the largest city, we have the hospital here. Fort Mill has hospital now, but still they kind of the services are here in Rock Hill, so they can congregate here. So it's a challenge, but what we want to do is move somebody along into a service that help them be productive. But the challenge is not everybody wants that. As the old saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing a perspective that, it's good to hear it. Good to hear it from our leader. So I'm also curious, what would you say from your lens, what's the hardest part about being an officer?
The stress of the level of calls that you have to go to and what you have to endure. One thing that it's limited in today's world of us having to be able to take quick action on someone that is truly causing a problem. We have to go further than we used to, which is in some cases not bad, but some cases it is. So I think the officers are stressed that we can't end the situation. We have to go through more processes. And I mean, they get abused by some people, verbally, not physically, but verbally, and not listen. And again, trying to de-escalate and not going too quick, hands-on, and making an arrest. Because ultimately, there is a time to make an arrest, but doing just all arrest doesn't work ourselves out of problems. It may temporarily. That's one, but it's also what you see that people can do to one another. Some of the times that officers arrive, especially with kids that have been beaten and sometimes murdered, and that's a horrible sight for an officer to deal with. We had one officer that was really had a tough go for a couple of weeks. We had a car that drove up behind the flatbed trailer, killed her and her child. I mean, that's traumatic to see. And then following that, I believe it was the next week, there was a child death from a parent locking the kid in the car and forgetting. That's a miserable death. But to see that for a young, a young infant or toddler, that's rough and that's imprinted. And then you see some of the abuses and kids. Sometimes it's easy to work through adult. It's not easy, but the kids are always tough. And sometimes officers happen to be there. We had another officer that came up on a call, and by the time they got there and got in the house, they actually witnessed the husband stabbing the wife. I mean, that's kind of one of those things. Wow. So those are the and luckily that's not an everyday occurrence, any of that. But it does happen frequently that you see these different things, and it builds up with an officer over time. I mean, it's really big right now in law enforcement trying to get that mental wellness to talk, because cops, we're just supposed to take it, and just keep driving on, forget about it. And in real life, that's not how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, because that's to the heart of the challenge. Is you see and you have to endure so many things that just the regular public never sees, or at least they never see others doing it. They might have it inside their own home, but it feels like it's easy for any person to cast judgment on the police department if they've never walked a mile in those shoes and seen that, because I can't imagine seeing someone beating up a kid or beating up their spouse, because thank God, I didn't have to grow up with that. I didn't see that. So that's just, yeah.
But again, that's part of, part of the job, and that's what you kind of sign up for. But it's one thing to say, I know I'm going to see things, but when you actually experience it on a regular basis. And the other thing that kind of challenges officers are, you're doing this 12 hours a day, on a regular basis to do your time, but you're always very vigilant about what's going on around you. So over time, it's just hyper vigilance. So now you're going to Walmart on your day off, but you're still looking at it. You just can't get rid of it. So you're always at this heightened level of alert. It's just built into you after you do it for a while. So that's not necessarily the best for you either, because it's hard not just to let loose and relax and don't worry about anything. But when you're out in public, that's just naturally what a police officer does.
Yeah.
Again, pays a lot more attention to things than most people, because that's what they do for their job.
Yes. Well, I guess one more question around law enforcement, or maybe a short story then a question. So I'm watching recently on television, because I watch NFL football on Sundays. I'm watching that big time receiver down in Miami get pulled over in front of the stadium a couple weeks ago. And when the officer comes up to approach him, he pulls the window down, gives a little bit of attitude to the officer, puts the window back up, pulls it back down, tells him, quit hitting my window, pulls it back up, and eventually the officers pull him out of the car. And to me, as someone who's always viewed law enforcement as an ally and as the authority, I've never had a run-in. It's like all you got to do is just follow a few simple instructions and you'll be done with this quickly. But it always seems to be escalated by someone that throws some attitude into it. So I'm curious, from a law enforcement perspective, what is it that is going through the mind of the officer as they're going up for a routine or just a traffic stop? Because from the person who's sitting in the car perspective, I've been trained and think, put your hands on the wheel and let them know and have your gun permit and your gun visible. And other than that, just be compliant is kind of the way that I've been trained to believe. But what is going through the officer's mind when they come up from a routine traffic stop, Chris?
So when you look at most of the issues, and I can't speak directly to that one because I haven't seen the whole thing, but when you look at most of them, I'm not going to say it's 100%, but most of them, it would never have escalated if there was just compliance. And I know some people say, you said something about you put your hands on the wheel. So I taught my kids, and this is what I do. If you stop, you put your hand on your wheel, cut on your interior light at night, and just sit there. I mean, it's changed from the old days. It used to be you get out and were courteous and stood by your car. You don't do that today. But it makes an officer much more at ease approaching a car if they can see in the hands there. They can, the officer will say, can I have your driver's license, registration, and insurance card? And then get it. And if you got a gun somewhere, hey, I got a gun over here, that's okay. We, in the South here, there's guns everywhere. So having a gun around you is not that much of a surprise for officers. But sometimes it is a challenge when people just will not comply. And again, the officer may be at times rude, and they may not do everything just right. But generally, if we just work through that, and then there's a complaint system, and for us, if I have a saying when we look at complaints, it is what it is. If the officers are right, I'm going to stand behind the officers. The officers are wrong, we're going to stand by the complainant that we did wrong and apologize or move forward, making sure we won't have that happen again. But it is a challenge sometimes to solve a problem when individuals are just very belligerent. And a lot of times it's just I want to, kind of mess with you and get you upset.
Okay.
And if you're not on your A game as a police officer, you can sometimes be baited down a road that you shouldn't go.
Thank you. I think you've been asked a few questions in public before because you're really smooth. You really got some great answers, and it's really from the heart. So thank you for answering these questions from the.
I've been doing it a while.
Yeah. Is there a subject or a topic that is something that police officers we don't want to go and talk about that subject? Something that's kind of a sore spot. That's no.
No, there's really not. One of the things that I found, so I've been chief in January, this upcoming January will be 12 years. And I got 36 years of service. So one thing that I have learned, one is to listen to people. Sometimes people just want to be heard and vent. And because it has to deal with police, I've been on the phone for an hour and a half, sometimes just listening and trying to respond. But it's much better to do that. That is a much better use of my time than just saying, you know what, you're crazy and I don't want to talk to you and hang up. Well, they're going to be persistent if they feel like they have a grievance. Any of us would. So one of the things is listening, but the other side is educating. If people know what their rights are, know how we do our business and why, they may not like how we do something, but if they learn, well, we do it because there's a tactical reason to that. For officer safety, most people will say, they really like that, but at least I understand. So one of the things, again, is just communication, whether that's at community groups, forums, or just having a general conversation. But that's one of the biggest things for police community relations, and I've talked to a number of different groups. Police community relations is like a marriage. So if you have a good marriage and then you ignore it, it will start going downhill and it will get worse and worse and worse. Police community relations is the same way. In Rock Hill, I will say we have a really good police community relations, but we work on that all the time. But on the other side of that is the community has to reciprocate on that. I can't do it all myself. So that's where the Rock Hill community, I'm very appreciative of that they will meet us. There's many leaders in Rock Hill that will reach out, hey, I'm concerned about this. And I think as long as we're responsive, talk to people, answer their questions. They may not like it, but answer it honestly. And when the officer was right and they don't like it, hey, this is why we did it. But if we're wrong, say, you're right. I don't have an excuse for that. And that's happened. You know what? We got to fix that. You were right. We were wrong. And we'll fix it and try not to make that mistake. But
excellent.
As far as topics, I think if you say, nope, there's no topic. There's these topics that I want to talk about. That's when that relationship starts going downhill.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Chris, I appreciate that you invested some time and shared your story. And we met at the District 3 school kickoff. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, you were from Charleston. You came here. Did you go to high school or middle school here in Rock Hill at all?
All in Rock Hill. I went to, at the time, well, still Sullivan's there, and then Rock Hill High.
Sullivan and Rock Hill High. Okay.
And one of the things that I worried about when I transferred or moved from EMS to policing is I've got a lot of high school friends, and I wasn't sure about policing in the same, but I've been very fortunate on that too. There's been very few people that I actually had to arrest that were my friends, but those were very blatant. It wasn't like a little something. It was, well, we don't have a choice here. So that made it a little bit easier. But I never run into much of that. I'm still connected to a lot of people from high school, and that's cool.
Yes, sir. Well, shout out to those at Sullivan and Rock Hill High, because I know they'll be listening to this. Chief, I'd love to wrap things up today and just ask you a couple questions before we finish up. I wonder, I guess this is more on the personal side, if there is a book or a newspaper or something that you might read, is there anything you might recommend to us? And it could be around law enforcement or just anything that you might recommend in a book or article type space.
I am drawing a blank on that question. I read most of my time in reading is more on leadership. I think, that's where I need to spend most of my time at this point. I'm, trying to learn new skill sets on the computer and all that. But I'm really drawing a blank on this. So I'm sorry. There's a Lincoln.
Okay.
What was it? It's here. It was leadership. Lincoln
on leadership. Yeah.
That was one that was a really good book. That I thought, because if you look back in history and his time in dealing with adversity, but what's the word I want to use? Undermining and trying to, stop and change a lot of things that he were doing, and his philosophy of bringing those individuals in that really opposed him and worked through that. I believe, I can't name names, but I believe there's a few people he brought in his cabinet that were really opposed to him, but overall they started working together. And that's a really big challenge from a leadership standpoint. If you want to, to bring someone in that is kind of working against you, but you feel like that over time there's a trust and maybe there's a compromise. And that was kind of one of the parts that I got out of that book. I thought it was very relevant in today's times.
Excellent book, Lincoln on Leadership. And I think back, because my dad was he was in the military, and that happens to be a book that he had recommended, and I remember thinking about the idea of just bringing in people that think differently than me. Is there any advantage to that? And I felt earlier on in my leadership career that I wanted everyone that kind of thought like me, that was all motivated and they thought like me. And then I realized over time that to have divergence of thinking on my team, or at least be curious to them, to me, that's a stronger, more evolved version of a leader. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good book. Well,
I think leadership is working with others. I think in Proverbs, I don't know which part about a wise man seeks the counsel of many.
Yes.
And I truly, and again, has experienced that, because I don't have all the best ideas or the best solutions, but working as a team, generally you can come up with something that can work.
Absolutely. Well, on the lighter side of things, how about music, Chief? Is there a song or a genre or an artist that just fills your bucket and can be found at the Watts household?
Well, I'm generally, if I'm listening to music, it's country.
Okay.
But I don't listen to the radio. Sometimes I like to drive to work, or just in silence, just, no other distractions, because it's, for this job, it's, you would say more than anything, it's a problem. I'm solving problems.
Yes.
As they come in trying to figure out things. So that's one of the things that I like. I like the challenge of solving problems every day, whether it's personnel problems, whether it's problems in how we fight crime from, this community needs this. How do we serve them, or how do we provide the right services for them, and how do we do it? We have a meeting once every month now. It's called ComStat. It was kind of taken from New York, where we bring all the supervisors, and all we talk about is crime. Because sometimes we can get into business of just, especially command staff, the business of running the business of policing.
Okay.
And then we forget about crime. So we really spend a lot of time with the supervisors on the road. Right? We move resources. We're doing this. Does it work or does it not? Do we need to change? Are we good to move along? So, that's one of the things kind of be effective, but you got to bring everybody in, work together.
Yeah. Well, is there a place if we wanted to, investigate further or just find out more about the Rock Hill Police and law enforcement, potentially even if there's a place that we may be interested in, joining or interviewing with the force, where might we go to find out more and to connect with you, Chris? What's the best place?
So the best place is the City of Rock Hill website. Under that is police department. So you have the City of Rock Hill website, you have departments, and then you go down to police.
Okay.
All of our recruiting, if you are interested in policing, is under a recruiting website. One of the things that I do encourage, whether you're looking at becoming or a police officer or just want to learn more, we have a ride-along program that you can sign up on the website and just ride with officers. We've had so many people, and it's not really countless, but there's so many people that have come in that had a negative demeanor or a certain view of police and what we do. And I don't think we've ever had a rider, young or old, come back and say, you know what, y'all are horrible. It's now understand. It's not just writing tickets. It's just not going and harassing people. So that's one of the best ways that I would suggest for anybody, just to learn more. And it's easy for me to talk about it, what we do. But the best way is to sit in a car and spend, generally it's best on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night. Those are the busiest nights. And just get a good sense of, what's our responsibility, how we interact with each other as well as the community, and some of the things we face. So that's one of the probably best ways to find out just about what policing is about and how we do or why we do what we do is a better way to say it.
I had no idea that there's a program like that. That's great information. Thank you for sharing that. A ride-along program to find out more, maybe to be recruited, but just to find out more. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Chris, we come to the last question, and you have the last word, sir. This is the Eternal Optimist podcast. What might Eternal Optimist mean to you, Chris?
For me, is we live in the greatest country that I think we've ever been. There's a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of things that separate us, but there's more that connect us as a society. And I'm truly optimistic. Even that's part of going through and working out. But I think ultimately we're fortunate to live here. And we still have that open dialogue. Again, it's tough right now, and you're either this side or that side, and that doesn't accomplish anything. But I am very hopeful that as we move forward, the majority of people are good-hearted, that want to do the right thing, even though we all mess up from time to time. But I think overall, we're very fortunate to live in this time. It is the safest time in world history if you look at it. And I know sometimes people can feel like, oh, it is horrible, but generally they haven't traveled abroad and seen some of the conditions in today's times, and even in their conditions, in how awful it has been worse. So I think that everybody should be optimistic, even though it is a challenging time. We will work through it and come out on the other side better.